him, he would say, "May Allah show mercy to the brother of Musa. He suffered much greater than this, and he maintained patience." And the brother of Musa alayhi salam was Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam. And if you remember, when Musa alayhi salam went to receive the Torah in Mount Sinai, during that time you had Samiri, who was the leader of these troubled people who wanted to go back again to the worship of idols, and he carved. What did he carve? A calf made of gold. And people, this is described in Surah Al-Baqarah, right? And also in Surah Taha. Now, so during that time, when Musa alayhi salam came back and saw the situation, he was very upset with his brother Harun. And there is even a conversation that Surah Taha explains, or it goes in this passage there, where Sayyidina Musa is talking to his brother Harun, and he's saying, "Why did you let him after I was gone? Why this happened? فَعَصَيْتَ أَمْرِي, did you disobey my command?" he says. And then also he talks to Samiri directly. But anyways, that's a separate story. But they went through some difficult times, because it's not easy to change the whole, all the people from one set of belief all the way now into worshipping idols, and then back again from worshipping idols into worshipping God. So it makes sense that Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam was going through a lot during that time, because he knew the reality and so on. So Prophet alayhi salam is bringing to the people this, that why shouldn't I be patient? Meaning that at least we're not going through some difficulties, some obstacles that other nations, including their prophets, they went through. And that Prophet ﷺ and his believers, they didn't go through, through hardship. For sure, they went through a lot of hardship. But he's reminding us that others, they went through probably more hardship. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would watch permissible games and did not disapprove of them. And when voices would be raised in his presence, uttering boorish words, he would tolerate it and not take them to task. This goes against some people who, when they see other people having some enjoyment or having fun or playing sports or doing things that typically, whether you are a religious person or non-religious person, people just generally speaking, they would do them. And sometimes you have some extra religious individuals who'd say like, "Hey, why you're wasting your time? Why you're playing for an hour, 2 hours, instead of doing, worship or doing other tasks?" I mean, our bodies, our nature, we are created in such a way that we need a time for our body, we need a time for our heart, a time for our brain, a time for our spirituality, pretty much. So that has to be taken into consideration. And Prophet ﷺ would let that thing go. Or even boorish things here, it says. Or in his presence uttering boorish words, he would tolerate it and would not take them to task. Whenever the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was asked to invoke against someone, he would turn it from an invocation against to an invocation for the person. An example of that, if we can illustrate that with a quick example, not necessarily from his time, but just to make it more relevant. If somebody tells you, "Man, just curse at this person." No, instead of cursing this person who has done something wrong to you, right? You would say, "You know what? may Allah guide that person. May Allah make that person a better person in the future. So less people can be harmed from his evil. And that's a true believer right there, who wishes for the others the best. Because what's gone is gone. You're not gonna, if a person has hurt you, you're not going to gain anything for cursing that person. What are you gonna gain? Nothing. Probably the other person is going to be harmed. But even if we get harmed, we don't necessarily wish harm for the others as well. If I get harmed, I would wish for that person who harmed me to be better and not to harm the others and to be forgiven. This is our heart as believers. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never once struck a woman. This is very important as well. Muslim husbands, unfortunately, in many places around the world, they beat up their wives. She's not listening to me. She's not doing what I'm telling you. If you have reached to such a level where you cannot hold yourself, but be oppressive, be violent, abuse your partner, whether your husband abusing the wife, or sometimes there are rare cases, but there are wives abusing their husbands as well. If that's the case, then it is better for you to be separated or divorced from that person instead of causing abuse or physical harm like that. What is the sunnah of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam? To never hit, never raise your hand, never he raise his hand towards any of his wives. Not only that, but even a servant or anyone else, unless he participated in a war where he had to fight the enemy. Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu said, when a servant would do something to anger the Prophet of God, he would say, where is not for fear of retribution on the day of resurrection, I would have hit you with a toothstick. Like, he's showing, what is he showing here? He's showing that he's a human above all, right? Because he can have some anger. And he can be pushed to even hit somebody, because this is a human nature. But what gives us value is that we restrain ourselves, we control our anger. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Those who control their anger and those who forgive people. When God talks about the qualities of the believers. So Prophet ﷺ as well, he's showing us that he's a human overall. But he's the best of the human. Because he does not hit the people. Why? Because of his belief in the hereafter and the retribution in the hereafter. How about if that person is going to come on the day of judgment and say, oh God, I want my haqq, I want my justice back. How about if he has to pay with his good deeds? And number two, even if he has to express that anger, even if that would have been the case, he would not want to see the other person being harmed. Because with a toothstick, right? With a toothstick, there's not a toothstick, but this is the size of a toothstick. With a toothstick, you cannot cause harm to somebody. But it's just kind of an expression of anger. It's just like releasing a little bit of that anger that's inside of you, without causing really injuries to the other person. But even that, he did not do it. Why? Because to him, the hereafter mattered the most. So here we see, number one, the dignity of the human being, the way how he dignified humans, by saying that if I would have had to express my anger, it would be a size of a toothstick. And number two, his strong belief that he cared about the hereafter. That was everything for him. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى توفيق.